Hey guys, tonight we're taking a trip back in time to explore the wide world of ancient sports. But forget about neatly manicured fields, instant replays, and multi-million-dollar contracts. We're going to a time when the line between friendly competition and outright mortal combat was blurry at best, and often completely non-existent. You're going to be our designated spectator, an unfortunate soul fated to have a front row seat at some of the most grueling, bizarre, and frankly horrific sporting events in history. Let's be honest, your chances of surviving as a competitor in any of these events would be minimal. Complaining about the lack of a concussion protocol would probably just get you disqualified permanently. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other people like you who are fascinated by the brutal pastimes of our ancestors. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always great to see where in the world you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins under the relentless, bleaching glare of a Greek sun. Sometime in the 5th century BC, you find yourself part of a massive, sweating, jostling river of humanity, all flowing in the same direction along a dusty, rutted road. This is the Great Pilgrimage. You are on your way to Olympia. It's not a single city, but a sacred sanctuary, a sprawling complex of temples, treasuries, and athletic buildings nestled in a verdant valley. For a few weeks, every 4 years, this place becomes the absolute center of the Greek world, as tens of thousands of men from hundreds of rival city-states put aside their constant warfare to gather in honor of Zeus and watch the pinnacle of athletic competition. The air is thick with dust kicked up by thousands of sandaled feet, the smell of roasting lamb from makeshift campsites, and the loud, cacophonous babble of a dozen different Greek dialects, all arguing, laughing, and haggling at once. You eventually find your place at the main venue, the stadion. The word stadium doesn't quite do it justice. There are no numbered seats, no luxury boxes, no comfortable plastic chairs. You are simply one of perhaps 40,000 men, packed shoulder to shoulder on a long, sloping, grassy embankment under the full, oppressive force of the midday sun. Married women, by sacred law, are forbidden from even being in the vicinity of the games on pain of death. Your only comforts are the floppy brim of your straw hat and a small skin of watered-down wine. The noise is a constant, deafening roar, the collective voice of a massive, passionate, and heavily invested crowd. This entire event is, at its heart, a religious festival. You can see the great temple of Zeus in the distance, home to a 40-foot-tall statue of the god, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The athletes competing below are not just sportsmen, they are secular priests, their physical perfection a tribute to the gods. They compete completely naked, their bodies gleaming with a coating of olive oil, which is then dusted with fine sand to allow for a better grip. The lack of team branding or even basic uniforms makes you feel like you're watching a sporting event that's been stripped down to its most elemental, primal form. You witness the chariot races, a chaotic and dangerous spectacle of thundering hooves and splintering wood. You watch the foot races and the discus throwers, their bodies moving with a grace and power that seems almost divine. But you are here for the main event, the final competition of the games, the most prestigious and by far the most brutal. The Herald. His voice amplified by a bronze megaphone, steps forward and announces the beginning of the Pankration. The name means all powers or all strength, and it is a fitting description. This is the ancient Greek equivalent of a no-holds-barred, mixed martial arts fight, but with even fewer rules. It is a terrifyingly simple and pure form of combat, a common and celebrated fact of these ancient games. The goal is to force your opponent to submit by any means necessary. You can punch with a closed fist. You can kick to the legs, to the body, even to the head. You can use your elbows and your knees. You can throw your opponent to the ground. Once there, you can apply excruciating joint locks, trying to snap an arm or a leg. You can apply chokeholds, squeezing the life out of your opponent until he either gives up or passes out. There are famously only two rules. The first is no biting. The second is no eye gouging. That's it. Everything else is fair game. You look to the side of the fighting pit, where the 10 judges, the Hellenodikai, stand watching. They are dressed in solemn purple robes, and each one holds a long, forked wooden switch. Their job is to enforce those two rules. But you wonder, as two monstrously large athletes enter the sandpit, just how effective a wooden switch can be against men locked in mortal combat. Historians of the future will debate this very point. Was the no biting, no gouging rule a true, respected tenet of the sport? A kind of gentleman's agreement in the midst of brutality? Or was it an ideal that was often ignored in the heat of the moment, with the judges only able to flog the offenders after the damage was already done? The two pancratiasts approach each other in the center of the sandpit, the skama. They are mountains of muscle and scar tissue, their bodies honed into living weapons. They circle each other warily. There are no rounds, no time limits. The fight will continue until one man submits by raising his index finger, or until he is rendered unconscious or, on rare occasions, dead. The fight begins with a sudden explosion of violence. One man launches a vicious kick at the other's thigh. The sound of the impact, a sickening wet thud that you can hear even over the roar of the crowd. The other fighter absorbs the blow and answers with a flurry of powerful, looping punches. It's not the technical, strategic boxing of a modern ring. It is raw, brutal bludgeoning. The fight quickly goes to the ground, and this is where the true horror of the Pankration is revealed. It becomes a slow, grueling, intimate struggle of leverage and pain. One man gets the other in a headlock, his massive biceps squeezing, trying to cut off the flow of blood to the brain. The man on the bottom twists, his fingers clawing at his opponent's face, trying to find purchase, perhaps straying dangerously close to an eye socket. The crowd screams its approval and its advice. You hear coaches yelling instructions from the sidelines. You watch as one fighter manages to trap the other's arm, bending it back at an angle that seems physically impossible. The man's face is a mask of pure agony, his muscles straining against the pressure. You are sure his arm is about to snap. For a moment, he resists, his pride warring with the pain. Then, his resolve breaks. He taps the ground frantically with his free hand and raises his index finger. It is over. The judge steps in and declares the winner. The victor stands, his body bruised and bleeding, and raises his arms to the sky, accepting the roar of the crowd, while the loser is helped away by his trainers, his arm hanging limply at his side. Match after match unfolds in this brutal fashion. The sun beats down. The sand of the pit becomes dark with sweat and patches of blood. But the final match of the day is the one that will be remembered for all time. A bizarre and gruesome story that perfectly encapsulates the spirit of this terrible sport. It is the story of Arhikion of Phegalia, a detail of history so strange it feels like myth. Arhikion is a legend, already a two-time Pankration champion at previous Olympic Games. He is now in the final match, going for his third victory wreath. His opponent is a younger, immensely powerful challenger. The fight is long and grueling. Both men are exhausted, their bodies slick with sweat and grime. In the final moments of the struggle, Arhikion's opponent manages to get him in what appears to be an inescapable hold. He has wrapped his legs around Arhikion's torso in a painful scissor lock, squeezing the air from his lungs, while his arms are wrapped around Arhikion's neck in a chokehold. Arhikion is trapped. His face begins to turn a dusky purple. You can see him suffocating. The crowd is on its feet, screaming. It seems to be over. But then, from the side of the pit, Arhikion's trainer shouts out one last, desperate piece of advice. "What a noble funeral it is," he bellows, "not to concede at Olympia." The words seem to reach Arhikion, even in his oxygen-deprived state. He is not allowed to bite or gouge, but the rules say nothing about breaking his opponent's bones. With the last ounce of strength in his body, he ignores the chokehold and focuses on his opponent's trapped foot. He twists. There is a sickening crack, an audible pop of bone and sinew. The opponent, his ankle now dislocated and shattered, screams in agony. The pain is so sharp, so immediate, that he forgets the chokehold. He forgets everything but the fire in his foot. Instinctively, he raises his index finger in submission. At that exact same instant, the life leaves Arhikion's body. The chokehold has done its work. His neck is broken. He goes limp and dies. A moment of stunned silence falls over the stadium. Then, confusion. Who is the winner? Arhikion is dead, but his opponent is the one who submitted. The Hellenodikai, the judges, confer. After a moment, they make their ruling, a decision of perfect, cold, sporting legalism. Since the opponent had officially submitted before Arhikion was officially dead, the victor is Arhikion. And so, you witness one of the most surreal victory ceremonies in the history of sport. The crowd cheers wildly as the lifeless body of Arhikion of Phegalia is propped up by his trainers. The victory wreath of sacred olive branches is solemnly placed on the head of the corpse. His countrymen hoist his body onto their shoulders and parade it around the stadium, celebrating their dead champion. A man who won his final, brutal match in the very moment of his death. You stare, speechless, at the grotesque procession, and you understand the terrifying heart of this ancient sport victory is more important than life itself. The surreal image of the dead champion, Eurytion, being paraded around the Olympic Stadium fades like a fever dream. The roar of the Greek crowd softens, the dust settles, and the memory of that bizarre, brutal victory dissolves. Your strange journey continues. You find yourself no longer on a sun-baked, grassy embankment in Greece, but on the muddy, reed-choked bank of a vast, slow-moving river. The sun is different here. It's a whiter, more oppressive heat, and the air, thick with humidity, feels heavy in your lungs. You have been flung backwards in time, thousands of years before the first Greek Olympiad, to the ancient timeless land of Egypt during the age of the Old Kingdom. You are standing on the shores of the Nile. The great river is the lifeblood of this entire civilization, a serene, glittering ribbon of water that has carved a fertile paradise through an endless desert. Its annual flood dictates the rhythms of life, depositing the rich black silt that makes agriculture possible. To the Egyptians, the Nile is a god, a source of all prosperity. But you, the unwilling tourist of history's horrors, sense that this placid surface conceals a deep and ancient danger. This is a central, unavoidable fact of life and death in ancient Egypt. The river that gives life also takes it away with a terrifying, casual violence. Beneath the murky, brown water lurk some of the world's most efficient predators. Massive Nile crocodiles, prehistoric reptiles that can grow up to 20 feet long, lie in wait, perfectly camouflaged in the muddy shallows. And in the deeper channels, there are the hippopotami. You might think of them as gentle, slow-moving giants, but the reality is that they are fiercely territorial, notoriously aggressive, and responsible for more human deaths in this part of the world than any other large animal. The river is a minefield, and you watch as the local fishermen and ferrymen navigate it with a kind of ingrained, fatalistic respect. They know that a moment of carelessness, a capsized boat, or a stumble at the water's edge can mean a swift and horrifying end. You are here today as part of a nobleman's entourage, enjoying an outing on his riverside estate. While the nobleman and his family lounge in a shaded pavilion, you are directed to watch an entertainment he has arranged on the bank. Several groups of fishermen are preparing their boats, but these are not the sturdy wooden vessels you might expect. They are simple, low-riding rafts, fashioned from bundled stalks of papyrus reeds, the same material they use to make their paper. They look flimsy, barely seaworthy. The men themselves are lean and muscular, their skin burnished a deep brown by a lifetime under the Egyptian sun. They are carrying long, thick wooden poles, some over 10 feet long. You assume they are setting out to fish in the thickets of papyrus that grow in the shallows. You are wrong. You have seen depictions of what is about to happen. Strange and chaotic scenes painted on the walls of ancient tombs, like the famous one in the tomb of the Vizier Ptahhotep. You had always assumed those paintings were symbolic, an artistic flourish. You are about to discover they were alarmingly literal. With shouts and laughter, the men pull their rafts out into a wide, clear patch of water. There are perhaps 5 or 6 rafts, with 3 or 4 men crowded onto each one. The atmosphere is loud and boisterous. There is no herald, no solemn ceremony like at Olympia. This feels more like a chaotic neighborhood get-together than an organized sporting event. Then, without any formal signal, the game begins. Two of the rafts pull towards each other at speed. As they get close, the men raise their long poles. They are not using them for navigation anymore. They are using them as weapons. One man swings his pole like a club, aiming for the head of a man on the opposing raft. The man ducks, and the blow glances off his shoulder. He retaliates with a sharp jab of his own pole to the other man's chest. The goal becomes brutally clear to knock your opponents off their raft and into the water. Soon, the patch of river is a swirling, chaotic melee. It's a multi-boat, free-for-all brawl. Unlike the disciplined, one-on-one combat of the Pankration, this is pure anarchy. Men are swinging their poles wildly. They are grappling hand to hand, trying to wrestle each other overboard. They use the poles to hook opponents' legs and trip them. One raft, overloaded with men leaning to one side, capsizes completely, sending its occupants splashing into the murky water. They come up sputtering and laughing, and immediately try to climb onto a rival team's raft, continuing the fight. As you watch this confusing spectacle, you find yourself pondering what exactly you are witnessing. This is a question that archaeologists and historians will debate for millennia, looking at the same tomb paintings that you are now seeing brought to life. Is this a genuine sport with rules, teams, and a recognized winner? Or is it a form of ritualized combat, a chaotic performance meant to symbolize the eternal Egyptian theme of order triumphing over chaos? Perhaps it represents the battles of the god Horus against the followers of Set, or, as some will argue, is it something far more mundane? Is it possible that this isn't a sport at all, but simply an artistic depiction of the very real? Violent disputes that broke out between rival groups of fishermen over the best fishing territories in the reeds. A kind of stylized gang warfare on the water. From your vantage point on the shore, it certainly feels less like a sport and more like a riot. The violence is clumsy and almost comical. Men whack each other with poles, pull each other's hair, and tumble into the water with loud splashes. The nobleman and his family are laughing, entertained by the slapstick nature of the brawl. It feels a world away from the grim, life-or-death intensity of the Pankration. You almost start to relax. You think to yourself that while it may be chaotic, it's not truly horrific. It's just a bunch of guys messing around on boats. And that's when you remember where they are. They are not in a controlled arena or a sandpit. They are in the Nile. The brawl reaches a frantic peak. Two men, balanced precariously on the edge of a single raft, are locked in a shoving match. One gives a final, mighty heave, and the other loses his balance. He windmills his arms, his eyes wide with surprise, and then falls backwards into the brown water with a great splash. A sudden, sharp silence falls over the crowd on the bank. The laughter cuts off. Even the fighting men on the other rafts pause, their poles held aloft. All eyes are fixed on the spot where the man went under. The water is still, too still. You hold your breath. The seconds stretch out, feeling like minutes. The sun beats down. The only sound is the gentle lapping of the river against the shore and the distant cry of a waterbird. Then you see it. About 20 feet from where the man fell in, you see a subtle, V-shaped ripple on the water's surface, moving with a silent, unnatural speed. A moment later, you see a glimpse of a ridged, green-brown backslice through the water for just an instant before disappearing again. A crocodile. It has heard the splash. It is investigating. A collective gasp goes through the onlookers. A woman shrieks. The man who fell in finally surfaces, his head breaking the water with a desperate gasp. He coughs and sputters, his eyes wild with a panic that has nothing to do with the fight. His friends on the raft are screaming at him, pointing frantically. He sees the direction of their pointing, and his face becomes a mask of pure, primal terror. He begins to swim, not with the smooth strokes of a confident athlete, but with a frantic, splashing scramble, a desperate attempt to propel himself towards the safety of his raft. The men on the raft extend their poles to him. The water behind him erupts in a sudden, violent swirl as the massive reptile makes its move. For a heart-stopping moment, you think you are about to witness something truly unspeakable. But the man, powered by sheer adrenaline, makes a final, desperate lunge. His fingers find the edge of the papyrus raft. His friends grab his arms and haul him out of the water, dragging him onto the flimsy deck like a landed fish. He lies there, gasping and trembling. Safe. The game, if it ever was one, is over. The reality of the ever-present danger has shattered the festive atmosphere. The fight is forgotten. The teams of fishermen, now silent and subdued, slowly pull their rafts back to the shore. The nobleman on the bank claps his hands politely, as if a theatrical performance has just concluded. You are left standing by the water's edge, your heart pounding in your chest. You now understand the true horror of this particular ancient sport. The real opponent wasn't the man with the pole on the other raft. The real opponent was the river itself. The casual violence of the brawl was just a prelude, a way of tempting fate. It was a game of Russian roulette played with a 10-foot crocodile, where the prize for losing wasn't just humiliation, but the prospect of a swift, anonymous, and terrifying death in the muddy waters of the Nile. The memory of the Egyptian sun and the dark, swirling waters of the Nile recedes, washed away by the currents of time. Your journey as a fated spectator of horrific sports lurches forward, and you find yourself in a city you have seen before, but in a different, more glorious era. You are back in Constantinople, but this is not the 12th century city of intrigue you once knew. This is the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire in the year 532 AD, at the absolute height of its power and splendor under the ambitious Emperor Justinian I. The city is a spectacle of imperial might. The Great Palace is a city within a city, a labyrinth of marble halls, gilded chambers, and lush gardens. The newly built church of Hagia Sophia, a wonder of the world, is nearing completion, its colossal dome seeming to float above the city. And at the very heart of public life is the structure you have come to today, the Hippodrome. It is a place of breathtaking scale and grandeur, a colossal U-shaped arena. It can hold over 100,000 spectators, a roaring sea of humanity packed into steep tiers of marble seating. Down the center of the track runs the Spina, a raised barrier decorated with priceless treasures looted from across the ancient world Egyptian obelisks, and most famously, the Serpent Column, a strange bronze monument of 3 intertwined snakes, brought here from the sacred sanctuary of Delphi in Greece. You are here to witness the most popular, most passionate, and most dangerously divisive sport in the entire world, chariot racing. You find your seat, a hard marble step high up in the stands, and look down upon the scene. The sand on the track is raked smooth. The bronze gates of the starting boxes, the carceries, are polished to a gleam. The air is electric with anticipation, thick with the smells of sweat, spilled wine, and the sweet perfume worn by the wealthy aristocrats in the lower tiers. The roar of the crowd is a physical force, a constant wave of sound that presses in on you from all sides. But as you look around, you notice something strange. The crowd is not a single, unified entity. It is sharply, visibly divided. The spectators are wearing distinct colors. On one side of the Hippodrome, a vast section of the crowd is decked out in sea blue. On the other side, an equally large section wears vibrant green. This is not mere team preference. This is tribalism on an epic scale. You are witnessing the 2 great factions that dominate the city's life, the blues, the Venetoi, and the greens, the Prasinoi. This is a central fact of life in Constantinople. The blues and greens are not just fan clubs. They are a combination of political parties, social networks, and heavily armed street gangs. They have their own leaders, their own chants, their own territories within the city. Their rivalry extends far beyond the Hippodrome. They are divided by class, with the blues generally associated with the traditional, landowning aristocracy and Orthodox Christianity. The greens, on the other hand, draw their support more from the merchants, artisans, and those who adhere to the Monophysite Christian heresy. To live in Constantinople is to have an allegiance, whether you want one or not. You thought the crowd at the Greek Olympics was passionate, but this is something else entirely. This is fanaticism. You sit, trying to make yourself as neutral and inconspicuous as possible. As the first race begins, the trumpets blare, the gates of the carceries fly open, and 4 chariots, 2 blue and 2 green, burst onto the track. A chariot is little more than a tiny, 2-wheeled wooden basket, light enough for a man to lift, pulled by 4 powerful, half-wild horses. The charioteers are the superstars of their age, men who risk their lives for glory and immense wealth. They stand braced in their chariots, the reins wrapped tightly around their waists, a sharp knife tucked into their belts, the only way to free themselves if they crash. The race is a whirlwind of thundering hooves, straining leather, and screaming crowds. The chariots careen around the tight turns of the Spina, wheels threatening to fly off, the drivers leaning at impossible angles. There are few rules. Ramming your opponent, forcing him into the stone barrier, or cutting him off is not just allowed, it is expected. The race is a brutal, high-speed ballet of controlled chaos. A green chariot takes a turn too sharply. It flips, splintering into 1,000 pieces, sending the driver tumbling across the sand as the other teams thunder past, narrowly avoiding his broken body. The green side of the hippodrome lets out a collective groan of despair, while the blue side roars with triumphant laughter. But today, the action on the track is not the main event. There is a deeper tension in the air. Emperor Justinian has recently arrested several members of both the Blues and the Greens for murders committed during a recent bout of rioting. He plans to execute them. As the day wears on, the chants from the crowd begin to change. They are no longer cheering for their teams. They are directing their voices towards the imperial box, the Kathisma, where Justinian and his wife, the Empress Theodora, are presiding over the games. At first, the factions chant separately, each begging for their own members to be spared. But Justinian, a man not known for bending to public pressure, ignores them. His silence is a fatal mistake. It is a spark in a room filled with gunpowder. A strange, unprecedented thing happens. A blue chant leader shouts a question to the Greens across the stadium. The Greens shout a response. A dialogue begins. And in that moment, the two mortal enemies find a common greater enemy, the Emperor. Their separate chants merge into one, a single, terrifying word, repeated by 100,000 voices in perfect, rhythmic unison. Nika, Nika, Nika. It is the Greek word for conquer or win. It is the cry a charioteer's supporters would shout as he neared the finish line. But now, it is not directed at the charioteers. It is a declaration of war against the throne. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine. This is no longer a sporting event. It is an insurrection. The crowd surges. The guards at the exits are overwhelmed. Tens of thousands of people, blues and greens united in a single, furious mob, pour out of the hippodrome and into the streets of Constantinople. The sport has spilled its banks, and it is about to drown the city in fire and blood. You are trapped, a terrified spectator to a city's self-destruction. From your vantage point, you watch the chaos unfold. The mob, now in control of the streets, attacks the symbols of Justinian's rule. They set fire to the Praetorian prefecture. Smoke begins to billow from the great church of Hagia Sophia, which is burned to the ground. The city is burning. For 5 days, Constantinople is in a state of anarchy. The city guards are powerless. You huddle in your small rented room, listening to the sounds of the riot, the roar of the crowd, the crash of breaking doors, the screams. This is a horror beyond that of any individual combat. This is the horror of social collapse, the terrifying spectacle of a civilized city tearing itself apart. During the chaos, you hear whispers of the political maneuvering happening behind the scenes. This is where you see the hand of the powerful. The debate over whether these factions are organic or manipulated played out in real time. The senators and aristocrats who hate Justinian for his high taxes and his low-born wife see their chance. They find the nephews of a former emperor, declare one of them the new emperor, and parade him to the hippodrome to be crowned by the riotous mob. It seems that Justinian's reign is over. In the palace, he prepares his escape, ready to flee the city by sea. But then comes the moment that changes history. His wife, the Empress Theodora, a former actress and dancer of immense courage and intelligence, refuses to leave. She confronts Justinian and his panicked advisors, delivering a speech that will become legendary. The royal purple, she declares, is a noble burial shroud. It is better to die an emperor than to live as a fugitive. Her words fill Justinian with a new resolve. He will not run, he will fight. He gives command of his loyal palace guard to his two greatest generals, Belisarius and Mundus. They formulate a plan that is both simple and utterly ruthless. They wait until a huge portion of the mob, both blues and greens, have crowded back into the hippodrome to celebrate their new puppet emperor. Then, the generals make their move. They seal the exits. The imperial troops, hardened veterans loyal to Justinian, march into the great arena from both ends. What follows is not a fight. It is a slaughter. You, from your window overlooking the city, do not see the details, but you hear the sounds. The roar of the mob changes from one of triumph to one of confusion. Then terror. Then a great collective scream of death that goes on for hours. The soldiers methodically kill everyone trapped inside. By the time the sun sets, the Nika riot is over. The hippodrome, the great center of sport and public life, has become a giant, silent tomb. An estimated 30,000 people have been killed. The city is a smoldering ruin, but it is quiet. Justinian is firmly back in control. The power of the factions is broken for a generation. You look out over the silent, smoking city, and you understand the true, horrific nature of this sport. The danger was never really for the charioteers on the track. The real sport, the one with the highest stakes, was the political game played by the powerful, using the passions of the fans as their pawns. And the horrific finale was not a simple crash, but a citywide riot and a state-sponsored massacre. A brutal lesson in what happens when the lines between sport, politics, and violence are erased completely. The stench of smoke and death slowly fades from the ruined streets of Constantinople. The memory of the Nika riot, a horrific spectacle of sport-fueled mob violence culminating in a state-sponsored massacre, recedes into the quiet annals of your long, cursed memory. Your journey as a spectator of horrific sports takes its most dramatic leap yet. You are flung across an ocean the people you just left don't even know exists, and forward in time several hundred years, you awaken not to the sound of a roaring crowd in a marble arena, but to the chirping of unseen insects in a dense, suffocatingly humid jungle. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, sweet, cloying blossoms, and decay. Strange. Stepped pyramids of stone rise above the jungle canopy, their sides covered in intricate, alien carvings. You are in a Mayan city-state, deep in the heart of Mesoamerica. sometime in the middle of the classic period, and you have arrived on the day of a very important game. You are guided to the city's ceremonial center, to a structure unlike any you have ever seen. It is a long, narrow playing alley with a packed earth floor, flanked by two massive, parallel stone walls that slope steeply upwards. The acoustics are strange. A single clap echoes eerily down the length of the court. The walls themselves are covered in carved reliefs depicting warriors, gods with the features of jaguars and feathered serpents, and scenes of ritual and sacrifice. The crowd finds its place, not on comfortable seats, but on the high stone tiers atop the sloping walls. Nobles, adorned in brilliant green quetzal feathers and heavy jade ornaments that clink softly as they move, watch with a grave intensity. The atmosphere is not one of boisterous, drunken fun like a Roman holiday, nor of factional rivalry like the Hippodrome. The air is thick with a kind of solemn, religious gravity. This is not mere entertainment. This is a sacred rite. You look down into the eye-shaped court as the two teams of players enter. They are magnificent physical specimens, their bodies lean and powerful, but their equipment is what catches your eye. They wear thick, heavy leather padding around their waists and on their hips, like protective belts or yokes. Some have pads on their knees and elaborate headdresses. This is not for decoration. It is for protection against the single most important piece of equipment in the game, the ball. Then, a priest brings out the ball itself. It is a solid sphere of black, native rubber, and it is heavy. This is a crucial, obscure fact of the game that you understand immediately upon seeing it. This is not a light, air-filled ball. This is a solid 9-pound cannonball of vulcanized rubber, made from the sap of a local tree mixed with juice from morning glory vines to give it its unique bounce and resilience. You realize with a jolt that being struck by this object at speed could easily break a man's ribs, shatter a skull, or cause fatal internal injuries. The protective gear is not an accessory, it's a necessity for survival. The game begins. Known to the later Aztecs as Olamalistli, the rules are deceptively simple, yet demand incredible skill and bravery. You cannot use your hands or your feet. You can only strike the heavy, solid ball with your hips, your thighs, and sometimes your upper arms or shoulders. The goal is to keep the ball in constant motion, bouncing it off the sloping walls and into the opposing team's end zone. The game is fast, acrobatic, and incredibly violent. Players dive onto the hard-packed earth, twisting their bodies to strike the ball with their leather-clad hips. The sound of the solid rubber ball hitting a player's hip guard is a sickening, fleshy thud that echoes off the stone walls. They crash into the sloping sides of the court at full speed, using the angle to propel themselves or the ball. You watch as one player leaps, contorting his body in midair to meet the ball with his thigh, sending it flying back towards his opponents. It is a display of athletic prowess, as impressive as any you saw at the Greek Olympics. But unlike the Pankration, which was a duel between two men, this is a team sport that requires coordination, strategy, and a complete disregard for one's own physical safety. After a long period of grueling play, with the score still 0, the true objective of the game becomes apparent. High on each wall, halfway down the court, is a single, vertically mounted stone ring. Its opening barely wider than the ball itself. The ultimate goal. An act that usually ends the game immediately is to propel the 9-pound rubber ball through that tiny stone hoop using only your hip. The feat is so difficult that it can take hours or may not happen at all. As you watch the brutal, exhausting back and forth, you begin to notice the carved reliefs on the walls in more detail. They are not generic decorations. They tell the story of this game. And the story is a grim one. You see a relief that clearly depicts a player kneeling on the ground, while another player, or perhaps a priest, stands over him, holding in one hand a flint knife and in the other, the kneeling man's own severed head. Your blood runs cold. You've seen death in sport before. You've seen the accidental death of Erykion, the potential death in the crocodile-infested Nile, and the mass death of the rioting fans in Constantinople. But this is different. This is organized, ritualized, and sacred death. The game is directly and inexorably linked to human sacrifice. The Pankration was for personal glory. The fishermen's jousting was for amusement. The chariot races were for political power. But this game is for the gods. A player on one team misjudges the bounce of the heavy ball. It strikes him square in the chest, knocking the wind out of him. He collapses to the ground, gasping for air, and has to be carried from the court by his teammates. A broken rib is the least of the dangers here. The real danger is in the final outcome of the game. But who is the victim? This is the great, terrifying question, a subject that historians and archaeologists will debate for centuries. As the game nears its conclusion, you try to read the faces in the crowd to understand the stakes. Is it the captain of the losing team who will be sacrificed, a punishment for his failure in this sacred contest? Or, as some of the myths and carved reliefs seem to suggest, is it the captain of the winning team who will be given the ultimate honor? Is the sacrifice a punishment or a reward? Is the victorious warrior, having proven his strength and worth, now deemed the most fitting offering to appease the gods, to ensure the sun will continue its journey across the sky, to guarantee the rains will come and the maize will grow? The uncertainty hangs over the court, transforming the game from a simple contest of skill into an almost unbearably tense existential drama. Every point scored, every brilliant defensive move, could be a step towards either glory or the sacrificial altar. You watch the players, their faces grim and determined, and you cannot tell if they are fighting for their lives or for the honor of being chosen to die. The game ends. A player makes an impossible shot. With a heroic, diving hip strike, he sends the black rubber ball flying through the air, and it passes cleanly through the stone ring. A great collective gasp rises from the crowd, but it is not a cheer of celebration. It is a sound of awe, of reverence, of dreadful finality. The game is over. The players, exhausted, bruised, and bleeding from scrapes, stand silently in the court. There is no victory parade, no trophy. The high priest, his face hidden behind a terrifyingly ornate mask, his body draped in the skin of a jaguar, slowly descends the great stone staircase into the playing alley. He is carrying a long, elegant flint knife, its obsidian edges glistening black in the sun. He walks to the captain of the winning team, the man who scored the final, impossible goal. The player stands tall, his face a mask of stoic, ecstatic acceptance. There is no fear in his eyes. He has achieved the greatest honor. He has played the game of life and death, and he has won the right to give his life to the gods. He kneels before the priest. The crowd is utterly silent. The priest raises the obsidian knife high, its black, volcanic glass seeming to drink the sunlight from the sky. You watch, frozen, as the ultimate price of victory is about to be paid. A horrific and sacred transaction to keep the cosmos turning. This is not sport as competition. This is sport as a sacred, bloody prayer. The image of the obsidian knife, stark and black against the tropical Mayan sun, dissolves into a silent, reverent darkness. Your long, strange journey through the horrific sports of the past wrenches you away from the humid, incense-filled air of the jungle and throws you into a world of biting cold and stark, treeless beauty. You are no longer surrounded by priests in jaguar skins and nobles in quetzal feathers. You are now in 10th century Iceland, a rugged, newly settled island on the edge of the known world, a land of ice and fire. You stand on the edge of a wide, frozen field that borders a steel-gray fjord. The wind is a physical force, a relentless, razor-sharp gale that whips across the volcanic landscape, carrying the scent of cold stone and the faint, sulfurous smell of distant hot springs. In the distance, snow-dusted mountains rise up against a pale, low winter sky. This is the world of the Norsemen, the Vikings, a hardy and fiercely independent people who have built a new society here, far from the kings and kingdoms of mainland Europe. They are governed by powerful chieftains known as Godar, who meet each year at a great outdoor assembly called the Althing to make laws and settle disputes. This is a common and central fact of their society. It is a commonwealth built on a complex legal code and a fierce sense of personal honor. But you quickly learn that when the law is not enough, disputes are often settled by other means. A crowd has gathered for a winter festival. These are farmers and warriors, their faces weathered by the wind, their bodies wrapped in heavy, coarse wool and furs. They are here for a feast, for trade, and for a game. You watch as two groups of men begin to gather on the frozen field. They are preparing to play knatleikr. You try to make sense of what you are seeing. There is no formal arena, no stadium, no spectator seating. The playing field appears to be the entire valley. The teams are large and loosely defined, seemingly composed of all the able-bodied men from two rival farmsteads. They carry stout wooden bats, carved from ash or oak, somewhere between a modern field hockey stick and a flattened club. The ball is small, hard, and heavy, likely made of stitched leather packed tightly with animal hair. As the game begins, you realize that the horror of this sport lies not in its ritualistic meaning or its one-on-one brutality, but in its sheer, anarchic and attritional chaos. The objective seems simple enough: use the bat to drive the hard ball towards the opposing team's farmstead, which you can just barely see a few miles down the fjord. But the rules for how you accomplish this appear to be minimal to the point of non-existence. This is not the solemn, religious rite of the Mayan ball game, nor the disciplined, if brutal, duel of the Greek Pankration. This is a sprawling, violent, day-long brawl disguised as a game of catch. A player gets the ball and begins to run with it, his teammates forming a protective screen around him. Immediately, he is set upon by half a dozen opponents. They don't just try to get the ball. They try to obliterate him. They tackle him with a ferocity that makes you wince, their bodies crashing together with the sound of colliding boulders. A player can be checked, wrestled to the ground, and held there by several opponents while another takes the ball and continues the advance. The game flows like a slow-motion riot across the frozen landscape. You watch as two players, after a particularly vicious tackle, drop their bats entirely. They are now just wrestling in the snow, trading heavy, bare-knuckle blows to the face and body, settling some personal grievance that clearly has nothing to do with the location of the ball. Nobody stops them. The game simply moves on around their private brawl. This is a key and obscure feature of Natliker, as it's described in the great Icelandic sagas you've heard recited in the longhouses. The game is often just a socially sanctioned venue for simmering feuds between families to escalate. This brings you to the great debate that historians and saga scholars will have for centuries. What exactly were the rules of this game? The sagas are frustratingly vague, more interested in the heroic deeds and feuds of the players than in the technical aspects of play. Was Natliker a more organized game than it appears, with a complex set of rules that were simply understood by the players and not worth writing down? Or was it truly a semi-anarchic free-for-all, a brutal athletic contest that was designed to test endurance, strength, and pain tolerance above all else? A kind of sporting outlet for the violent tendencies of a warrior society. As you watch a player get his legs taken out from under him with a vicious swing of a bat and see no penalty called, you lean towards the latter theory. A modern observer might joke that this is what happens when you describe the rules of ice hockey to a group of people who think the penalty box is a sign of weakness. The game grinds on for hours. The pale sun crawls across the sky, offering little warmth. The players are gasping for air, their breath hanging in crystalline clouds in the frigid air. Their faces are bruised and bloody, their heavy woolen tunics torn. This is not a game of speed and agility so much as a contest of pure, stubborn endurance. It's about who can keep going, who can absorb the most punishment and still get back to their feet. As dusk begins to settle over the fjord, the game grows more heated, more personal. The ball is almost an afterthought now. The contest has become a series of vicious, score-settling encounters. You focus on two of the most famous players on the field. One is a man named Gunnar, a powerful and respected chieftain, known for his skill in the game. The other is a grim, hulking man named Egil, whose family, you have gathered, has a long and bitter blood feud with Gunnar's clan over a land dispute. Gunnar gets control of the ball and makes a powerful run, dodging two opponents. He is about to make a long pass with his bat when Egil comes at him from the side. It is not a tackle. It is a deliberate assault. Egil lowers his shoulder and smashes into Gunnar's legs with all his force. You hear a sickening, sharp crack echo across the frozen field, a sound that cuts through the grunts and shouts of the other players. Gunnar goes down in a heap, screaming in agony. His leg is clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle. The game comes to a halt. Several players rush to Gunnar's side, but Egil does not retreat. He stands over the writhing, injured Gunnar, a cruel, triumphant sneer on his face. "The great champion seems to have stumbled," he says, his voice loud enough for all to hear. The insult is as brutal as the blow. From across the field, Gunnar's younger brother, Cole, lets out a roar of pure, animalistic rage. He drops his Natleaker bat. In one smooth, chilling motion, he pulls the long, sharp knife, the Sayax, from the sheath on his belt. With a scream of vengeance, he charges across the field directly at Egil. The sport has officially ended. A blood feud has just turned hot. Other players, from both sides, jump in to restrain Cole before he can reach Egil and commit murder right there on the playing field. They drag him away, his face contorted with rage, shouting curses and promises of revenge. Egil, looking satisfied, is led away by his own kinsman. You are left standing in the gathering darkness, the piercing cold seeping deep into your bones. The game is over, but nothing has been resolved. A great champion is maimed. A bitter feud has been fanned into an open flame. You know, with absolute certainty, that this will not end here. There will be a revenge killing for this day's work, and that killing will demand another in return. A grim, bloody cycle that will likely consume both families. You finally understand the true, chilling horror of Natleaker. It is not just the physical brutality of the game itself, the broken bones, the bloody faces, the sheer exhaustion. It is the game's role as a formal stage for personal hatred, a catalyst that takes the simmering violence of a feuding society and gives it a time and a place to erupt, ensuring that the grim cycle of bloodshed will continue, long after the last whistle has blown, if there ever was one. The biting Icelandic wind that carried the shouts of a budding blood feud fades into a profound silence. The stark, frozen landscape dissolves, and the memory of that grim, anarchic game of Natleaker melts away. Your journey through the horrific sports of the past lurches you forward again, from the semi-mythical sagas of the North to the well-documented heart of the world's greatest empire. The air grows warm, thick, and heavy with the scent of civilization. You are in Rome, in the latter half of the 1st century AD, and you are taking your seat inside the newly completed Flavian Amphitheater, a wonder of architecture and engineering that will be known to all of history as the Colosseum. The sheer scale of the place is difficult to comprehend. It is an elliptical mountain of travertine stone and concrete, a masterpiece of arches and columns rising 4 stories high. As you find your place on a hard stone bench, you become one of 50,000 souls, a single drop in a roaring ocean of humanity. The noise is a constant, deafening cataract of sound shouts, bets, conversations, and cheers that all merge into a single, overwhelming hum. The sun beats down into the open arena, and you can smell the strange and uniquely Roman cocktail of sweat, spilled wine, garlic, and the sweet, cloying perfumes that are occasionally sprayed over the crowd from an elaborate system of misters to try and fail to mask the stench of blood. You look around and see the rigid social hierarchy of the Roman world laid out in the seating plan. Down below, in the most prestigious seats right near the arena wall, are the emperor, the senators in their white togas with broad purple stripes, and the Vestal virgins. Above them sit the wealthy equestrian class, the businessmen and minor aristocrats. Above them, the vast middle section is for ordinary Roman male citizens like you. And at the very top, in the nosebleed seats, are the women, the poor, and the slaves. Everyone has their place, all gathered to witness the spectacle together. The day's events, the ludi, have already begun. The morning was dedicated to the venations, the wild beast hunts. You saw exotic and terrifying creatures brought from the furthest corners of the empire, lions from Africa, bears from Germany, tigers from Parthia, pitted against each other or hunted down by specially trained beast fighters called venatores. Now, after a midday break for public executions of common criminals, the main event is about to begin. The trumpets blare, and the crowd's roar intensifies. It is time for the munera, the gladiatorial games. The great gates at either end of the arena swing open, and the pompa, the grand procession of the day's combatants, begins. The gladiators march into the arena, a vivid parade of muscle, leather, and polished bronze. As they circle the sand-covered floor, you find yourself contemplating the men themselves, a question that historians will debate for centuries. Who are these people? Were they all just slaves, condemned criminals, and prisoners of war, the lowest dregs of society, forced to fight and die for the amusement of the masses, or were some of them free men? Volunteers who had signed a contract with a gladiatorial school, willingly trading their freedom and risking their lives for the promise of prize money, fame, and a bizarre form of athletic stardom. Looking at the men, you can see evidence for both arguments. Some march with a sullen, hopeless shuffle, their eyes downcast, branded criminals with nothing to lose because they have already lost everything. But others stride with a swaggering confidence. They are magnificent physical specimens, their bodies honed to perfection. They wave to the crowd, acknowledging the cheers of their fans. They are superstars, celebrities of the arena. Their names graffitied on walls across the city. They are the living embodiment of Rome's strange, contradictory relationship with its gladiators. Socially, they were infamous, the lowest of the low, yet individually, they could be idolized. The procession finishes. The gladiators offer their traditional salute to the imperial box, and the pairings for the first match are announced. You quickly learn that this is not a random brawl. It is a highly organized and calculated form of entertainment, based on specific, classic matchups. This is a central and well-known fact of the games. Different classes of gladiator were equipped with different sets of arms and armor, creating a deadly game of rock, paper, scissors, where each type had a natural advantage over one and a disadvantage against another. You see a heavily armed Murmillo with his large shield and fish-crested helmet, paired against a lightly armored Thracian, whose small shield and curved scimitar offer speed and agility. But the most famous and anticipated pairing is announced for the next match. A Retiarius versus a Secutor. The two men enter the arena. The Secutor, or pursuer, is the image of a classic warrior. He wears a smooth, enclosed helmet that leaves only two small eye holes, designed to prevent his opponent's weapon from catching on it. He carries a large rectangular shield, a scutum, and a short, stabbing sword. The Gladius. He is a walking fortress. His opponent, the Retiarius, or Netman, is almost naked. He wears nothing but a loincloth and a metal guard on his left shoulder. The Gallerus. He is armed with a weighted net, a long, three-pronged trident, and a small dagger. He has no shield, no helmet. His tools are speed, distance, and entanglement. It is a classic matchup of speed versus power, agility versus defense. The fight begins. The Retiarius dances around the edge of the arena, his net held ready, forcing the heavily armored Secutor to chase him. The crowd loves the drama of it. The Secutor plods forward, his shield held high, trying to corner his nimble opponent. The Retiarius makes his move. With a flick of his wrist, he sends the weighted net flying through the air. The crowd holds its breath, but the Secutor is quick. He dodges, and the net falls harmlessly to the sand. The Retiarius is now in trouble. He has lost his primary weapon and must now rely on his trident to keep the heavily armed Secutor at bay. The pursuer becomes the pursued. As the two men circle each other, you notice a strange grinding sound from the center of the arena floor. A section of the sand-covered wood begins to lower, and then rises again, lifted by some unseen mechanism. A small, artificial rock formation, a prop, has just appeared in the middle of the arena, providing new cover for the fighters. You get a brief glimpse into the dark, narrow opening before it closes, and you realize you are looking into the hypogeum, the dark, complex, two-story underworld that exists directly beneath the arena floor. This is a fascinatingly obscure detail of the Colosseum's operation. Down there, in a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, is a world of slaves, stagehands, and engineers. They work a complex system of ropes, pulleys, and elevators that can lift gladiators, scenery, and exotic animals into the arena through dozens of hidden trapdoors, creating shocking, dramatic entrances and changing the battlefield in an instant. This whole spectacle is not just a fight, it is a meticulously produced piece of theater. Back in the arena, the fight reaches its climax. The Secutor finally corners the Retiarius against the arena wall. A few swift, professional blows from his sword, and the Netman is down, wounded in the leg. He drops his trident, a clear signal of defeat. He does not beg, but he raises the index finger of his left hand, the traditional appeal for missio, for mercy. A sudden hush falls over the 50,000 spectators. The fight is over, but the gladiator's fate is not yet decided. It now rests in the hands of the crowd, and ultimately, the emperor. All eyes turn to the imperial box. The crowd begins to roar, their voices a chaotic mix, some appreciating the Retiarius's brave fight, are shouting, "Mitte, let him go." But more, smelling blood, are screaming, "Ugala, slay him." They make their preference clear with a hand signal, the infamous thumbs down, which likely meant tucking the thumb into the fist, symbolizing a sheathed sword. The emperor, ever the populist, reads the mood of the crowd. He gives the signal, death. The wounded retiarius accepts his fate with a stoic resignation. The victorious secutor steps forward and, with a quick, efficient thrust of his gladius into his opponent's neck, delivers the killing blow. The crowd erupts in a deafening roar of approval. The horror of this sport, you realize, is not just in its violence, but in its cold, bureaucratic efficiency. The killing is done. And now, the cleanup crew arrives. 2 attendants enter the arena. One is dressed as Charon, the mythical ferryman of the underworld, carrying a large mallet. He prods the body of the fallen gladiator, a ritual to ensure he is truly dead. The other is dressed as the god Mercury, who is said to accompany souls to the afterlife. He touches the body with his staff. The caduceus, the corpse, is then hooked by the feet and unceremoniously dragged from the arena through a gate known as the Porta Libitinaria, the Gate of Death. Slaves rush out to rake over the blood-soaked sand, preparing the stage for the next bout. This has the one-on-one discipline of the Pankration, but it's armed and fought to the death. It has the roaring, factional crowds of the Hippodrome, but the goal is not just victory. It's a good death. It is the most organized, professional, and commercially successful industry of slaughter the world has ever known. A trumpet blares. The next pair of gladiators enters the arena. The show must go on. The body of the fallen gladiator is dragged away through the Gate of Death, leaving a dark trail on the freshly raked sand. The roar of the 50,000 spectators subsides to a contented murmur. You assume the main event is over, that the day of bloody spectacle is winding down. You think you have seen the peak of Roman cruelty and public entertainment. You are mistaken. The grand finale is yet to come. A strange, deep groaning sound begins to echo through the colossal stone structure, the sound of massive gears and winches turning in the hidden world beneath the arena. A team of engineers, moving with practiced efficiency, begins to remove large sections of the sand-covered wooden floor. They reveal the dark, cavernous space below the hypogeum you glimpsed earlier, but they do not stop there. The entire floor of the arena is dismantled and removed, leaving a vast, stone-lined basin, like an empty swimming pool of unimaginable size. Then, from massive, hidden sluice gates connected directly to the city's aqueducts, water begins to pour into the arena. It is not a trickle, but a deluge, a roaring, man-made waterfall that thunders into the basin. The crowd, which had started to grow restless, is now captivated, hushed by this incredible feat of engineering. As you watch the water level rise with astonishing speed, you find yourself marveling at the audacity of it. How is this possible? Historians and engineers of the future will debate the logistics for centuries. How did they make the subterranean levels of the Colosseum watertight? How could they drain such a massive volume of water efficiently? Was this a regular feature? or a rare and stunning stunt that was embellished by ancient writers. Some will argue that most of the truly massive naval battles were held on specially dug artificial lakes outside the city. But today, here, before your very eyes, it is happening. The Colosseum is becoming a lake. Within an hour, the floor of the arena is submerged under several feet of water. The greatest amphitheater in the world has been transformed into a contained ocean. Its marble lower tiers now a surreal waterfront promenade. The trumpets blare again. The crowd roars from tunnels at either end of the newly formed lake. Two miniature fleets of warships emerge. They are not props. They are real. Scaled-down biremes and triremes, propelled by rows of oarsmen. Each ship is packed with armed men. They are here to perform a naumachia, a staged naval battle, for the amusement of Rome. But as the two fleets maneuver in the enclosed space, you look closely at the men on board, and you realize a crucial, horrific detail. These are not professional gladiators or trained soldiers. Their faces are a mixture of desperation, defiance, and utter hopelessness. These are the Noxii, thousands of condemned criminals and prisoners of war, men already sentenced to death. They have been given weapons, placed on these ships, and ordered to kill each other for the crowd's entertainment. Their lives are worth nothing. They are not expected to survive. There will be no appeals for mercy, no chance of missio. Their deaths have already been decreed. You recall the story of a famous naumachia staged by the Emperor Claudius on the Fucine Lake, an event that involved 19,000 such condemned men. Before that battle, the combatants had given the emperor their now immortal salute. Ave Imperator, morituri te salutant. Hail, Emperor. We who are about to die salute you. Today, this new batch of the doomed shout the same line to the imperial box. The emperor, perhaps bored or feeling particularly cruel, is said to have replied simply, "Aut non," or not. The men, taking this as a pardon, refused to fight. They had to be forced into combat by the Praetorian Guard, who threatened to rain fire arrows down upon them if they did not begin to slaughter one another. There is no such confusion today. A trumpet blast signals the start of the battle, and a brutal, chaotic, and utterly pointless melee begins. The ships have no room to perform complex naval tactics. There is no wind for their sails. It is a battle fought in a giant bathtub. They ram each other at close quarters, the sound of splintering wood echoing off the high walls of the Colosseum. Men throw grappling hooks, and boarding parties swarm onto the decks of enemy ships. The fighting is a desperate, clumsy butchery. These are not trained swordsmen. They are terrified men fighting with weapons they barely know how to use. The water, which was a murky brown just moments ago, begins to turn red. Men who are hacked down on the decks fall overboard, their bodies disappearing into the bloody water. Others are pushed or leap to escape a fight, only to find themselves with nowhere to go. They are crushed between the hulls of the ships or simply drown in the shallow, filthy water, weighed down by their own armor. The crowd is ecstatic. They cheer as if they are watching a chariot race. They scream with delight at every successful boarding, every rammed ship, every man who topples into the water. They have been told that this battle is a historical reenactment, perhaps the great Athenian victory over the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. They are cheering for a story, but the deaths are real. The suffering is real. This is not sport. This is the pornography of violence. Death on a scale so vast it becomes an abstraction, a piece of grand, bloody theater. You have now seen the full, horrifying spectrum of ancient sports. You saw the one-on-one brutality of the Greek Pankration, a contest of individual strength where victory could mean more than life. You saw the chaotic, almost comical brawl of the Egyptian fishermen, where the true horror was the ever-present threat of the river itself. You saw the fanatical violence of the Byzantine chariot race fans, where the sport was merely a catalyst for citywide slaughter. You witnessed the solemn, sacred horror of the Mayan ballgame, where victory was a pathway to the sacrificial altar. You endured the anarchic, attritional violence of the Viking Natliker, a game that served only to fuel the grim cycle of blood feuds. You watched the cold, professional, and commercialized killing of the Roman gladiators, where death was a product to be sold to a cheering crowd. But this is the ultimate expression of it all. The Namakya is the logical and insane conclusion for a society so powerful, so wealthy, and so jaded that it requires the theatrical destruction of thousands of lives to feel entertained. It is not a duel. It is not a brawl. It is not a ritual. It is a meticulously engineered, state-sponsored mass extermination disguised as a historical pageant. The battle ends when one fleet has been completely destroyed, its ships sunk or captured, its crews almost entirely wiped out. The few pathetic survivors, clinging to the wreckage, are efficiently dispatched by archers from the side of the arena. The crowd gives one final, thunderous ovation. The show is over. You sit frozen on your stone seat as the great drain plugs are opened and the bloody water begins to gurgle away, revealing the horrifying aftermath on the arena floor, the splintered wrecks of the ships, and the hundreds upon hundreds of bodies. Your long, terrible journey is over. You have seen it all. There is no new horror left to witness. Now, as the last of the water drains away from the floor of the great arena, let the memory of that terrible spectacle begin to recede as well. The roar of the Roman crowd softens, becoming a distant echo, and then fades into a complete and welcome silence. The stone seats of the Colosseum dissolve, and the heat of the Roman sun cools into a gentle peace. Your long journey is over. Your tour of the most horrific sports in history has come to its end. You are no longer the spectator, no longer the unwilling witness to the brutality of the past. Your service is done. You can release the tension you have held. Let go of the images of struggle and strife, and feel your mind grow quiet and still. You are safe now, far from the dust of the arena and the fury of the crowd. You are in your own quiet space, your own peaceful sanctuary, wrapped in comfort and stillness. There are no more games to watch, no more horrors to endure. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet tide pulling you away from the distant shores of history and into the deep, calm, and restorative ocean of sleep.